All right, so I mentioned briefly yesterday about getters and setters, and the reason that we make all of our properties private in a class, or almost all of them, that it's like a good habit to get into. And the analogy that they have here is a bank. So in this bank, you can just access the vault however you want. Anybody can access the vault, right? You can just set your balance in the bank to whatever you want. So you can set it to $1 million. You can set it to $0. You know, you can set it to whatever you want because they just let you do that willy-nilly. Anybody can do that. Anybody can set anybody else's amount as well because they use the honor system. So does this seem to you to be a good idea? Why is it not a good idea? I like this little conversation that's going on in the text channel. Grant is being accused of not being trustworthy by Ben. I feel like we're going to have a fight on our hands. So now Grant is saying he doesn't trust other people. So what would make more sense? Can anybody give me a suggestion? You don't have to type it. You can just say it out loud. Anyone? Bueller?
I have like a counter for the amount of money a person has.
Well, we have that counter. The problem is anybody can change the counter.
Okay, well, have like restrictions so that only certain people, like bankers or whatever, can.
Okay, so only people inside the bank can change your balance. So then how do you deposit money?
Well, oh yeah, true. Okay, you can put in money, but they have to control who can take it out.
So I can access my account and I can just set it to $1 million. Excellent. Can I be the first person at the Bank of Arhan?
You know, I realize I might need to build upon that a little bit more.
Think about it in terms of classes, right? Java classes, not school classes. If you have a property and Arhan thinks the property of balance should be private so that only people inside the bank can change it, what could I do to allow other people to modify that balance but still retain control over it somehow? Instead of just making the property public, I make the property itself private. Well, what could I do? We are going to set the attributes to private, but we need a way to access these variables safely. right? So an accessor or a getter method is a way to access this method, right? To read it outside of the class. So we want to be able to check our balance anytime we want, but the bankers don't want us to be able to set that balance yet. We'll get to that in a second. So for now, we're talking just about reading the balance, not being able to update it. So that's what an accessor or a getter is. It's a public method, a public function, a public way, a getter, to look at the balance, but not be able to change it. So on most apps, bank apps on your phone, there's a way to just like touch, like do a fingerprint scan or something like that, and it immediately shows you your balance. Or like a ATM, it automatically shows you your balance, right? Or you can phone in and the first thing they say is, would you like to hear your balance, right? Those are all getters. Those are all they're doing is telling you the value of that property. It doesn't actually change anything. So here is our person, right, that we set up last time. And we don't want to be able to change, we don't want anybody to be able to change their name, email, or phone number, right? We don't want somebody else in the company or the school or whatever being able to just change your name. Like, so those are all private. Those are the properties that are private. We want to limit who can change those. But we want anybody to be able to see your name, for example. So we need a public, which means anybody can use it, string, since that's what we're going to get back. And the reason that these methods are often called getters is because you're getting information. And so a good name for this method would be get name, because that's exactly what it's doing. So having a descriptive name for your methods is always really helpful, right? We could name it public string ABC, but that wouldn't really help us, right? If we name it get name, that helps us understand what it's doing right off the bat. So it's public because anybody can use it. It's a string because it returns a string. We're going to call it get name, and it takes no parameters, right? We're not sending anything. We're not changing the name. We're not providing a password. We're not sending anything. So those parentheses are going to be empty. So all we're doing is asking it to return the private attribute name. So what this allows us to do now is to be able to get somebody's name without being able to change it. It's a public method. Anybody can use it. It gives us back a string, and we can call it on any person object that we create, and it will just give us back the name. So it doesn't change anything. So here are the other getters. Get email will return email. Get phone num will return phone num, right? So these are the three private attributes for this person class. So we want to be able to see them outside the class without being able to change them. So we create these accessors or getters, get name, get email, and get phone number. And all they do is return a string back to whoever called it. Give me a plus minus squiggly for if you understand what's going on. All right. So just to make it a little more complicated, you're not actually returning the exact value of the name or the email. What it's doing is it's making a copy of it. And that way, you know, you can't have a nefarious hacker like me trying to change your email to, like, you know, sparklebunny666@gmail.com or something like that. It makes a copy of your real email address and then sends it back. So that way, even if I change whatever I got back from that method, I'm just changing a copy of it. I'm not changing the real thing. So the data is still safe, in case you were worried about that. So this is something that almost every object needs to have. It's called a toString method. And the reason that we need it is you often want to be able to print out the contents of an object, right? If you print an integer object, you want to see a number on the screen. If you print a string, you want to be able to see the string on the screen. If you know, any object you have, especially when you're debugging, you probably want to be able to print it out. And if we just had this class definition right now, Java doesn't know how to print it out. It doesn't know what information to print. It doesn't know, like, what order to print it in. It would do something really weird if we tried to print out a person object. So whenever we create objects, we very often want to have something called a toString method. And the yellow bar at the top here is how it's spelled. And all that the toString method does is it tells Java how to convert your object into something that can be printed. Right? It converts your object into a string. So if we did what's on the screen right now, given our class, it wouldn't know what to do on the print statement. It doesn't know how to convert that person into a string that it can print out. Oh, actually, it shows what it would print here. It would print out in this little box in the bottom right that it is a person object at this memory location. That's all that Java knows about it in terms of printing. It wouldn't print out Mike. It wouldn't print out the email. It wouldn't print out the phone number. It would print out, hey, this is a person object at this memory location, which isn't very helpful if you're trying to debug why your program is not working. So what we really want is something like this. We want to print out the name, the email, and the phone number when we print a person object. That seems reasonable. So we're going to create this special method called toString, and every Java object is allowed to have a toString method. It has to be spelled just this way, but then Java knows that when I print out a person object, it's going to print out the name, a colon, the email, a colon, and the phone number. So instead of printing out person at blah, 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 it will print out what you expect, the name, the email, and the phone number. So anytime you're writing classes, you often want to have this, this type of method in it. So now, if you print this object Mike, Java knows what to do, because it will automatically call toString inside the print statement. That's why you have to use this very special method toString, because Java will look for it when you try to print something. So if there is no toString method, it'll print out like what kind of object it is. That's all that it knows. But if it does have a toString method, you don't have to call it. Like, you don't have to say Mike.toString. You can just print out Mike, and in the background, Java will look for that specific method in order to convert whatever information you want into a string. So if you just wanted to print out their name, then you could just print out their name. It's up to you as a programmer to decide what information is relevant and needs to get printed out. All right, so what does it mean by primitive? So primitive value is integer, like int. So there are a few primitive values in Java that aren't they're different from objects. I don't want to say they're not objects, but I just want to like be clear, because we're going to have to talk about wrapper classes. So so like int is different than integer. Integer is a class. Int is a primitive, and it's not a class. And we're going to get to the differences between those, but broadly speaking, you'll use the primitive type in like for loops. And you would use the object, big I, integer, full word, in like object arrays, array lists, and things like that. So we're going to talk more about that later, but just, I know I'm being a little big, but that's the difference. There are a few types in Java. They use a little bit less memory, that are called primitive types. And if you I want to see, here it is in the Java docs, if you're really interested. We'll talk more about that later. All right, in the meantime, give me another plus minus squiggly on accessors or getters and the toString method. All right. So if we have things that are getters to get our bank account value, what do you think we're going to need to set our bank account value? look at you guys. It's almost like you're paying attention. So we're going to jump ahead to mutators. And so you will all become Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you will wage war on my behalf against all the evil in the world. I hope that's okay with you. If not, too bad. So we got mutator methods, also called setters. I am not fancy, so I call them setters, but you may call them mutators because mutate means to change, so you're changing a value. Oh, so in the last lesson, if you remember back, 7 minutes ago, we talked about getters that return a copy of usually a private variable. However, if we want to be able to add money to our bank account, we need to be able to change that value too, not just look at it. If we want to be able to spend our money, we need to be able to change it. But unlike the trusting people of our original bank, we need to be more like Grant and not trust anyone. So we can't just make our attribute public. We need another public method that we can check. So quick quiz on 5.4. Say we have a class bank account, and I have a private int balance. So here's your check for understanding. You don't have to put anything inside it yet, although you can if you want. I just want to know, how would you declare your getter method to get the balance? So how would you write that first line? How would you start writing a method that would give you the bank balance to anyone that asks for it? So don't type it in yet. I want to give everybody a chance to think about it. Right? A method, at least the declaration, that would give anyone in the world the value of balance. So write the declaration of an accessor or a getter for balance. I'll give you 10 more seconds. All right, you may hit enter. What is your declaration? you may edit your answer or add a new answer after reading other people's answers if you'd like. If you are convinced by anyone else. You interested in changing your answer, Peter? So I feel like Peter and Cole are trying to correct my initial class declaration by telling me that I should have made the balance a double because integers don't have decimals. And while that is true, I also feel it necessary to make the point that if you are asked to do this on an exam, they will mark that wrong. So I understand your point. I should have made it a double because balances do have decimal points, but I didn't. I made it an integer for better or for worse. And so if the question gives you an integer, just answer with an integer. You won't get points for being technically correct. Well, I guess technically incorrect, even if you are morally correct. So it looks like most people are getting it. So it has to be public because anybody in the world has to be able to see it. Has to be an integer because balance is an integer, has to give you back an integer. Call it get balance is a great name because that's what you're doing. And then you're going to return balance. So you can return a private variable because you're inside the class. And then somebody else can at least get the balance. So the same way we had get balance, we're going to have set balance. And the biggest difference is you have to send it a value, right? When you're getting the balance, you don't send it anything. Those parentheses were empty. But when you're setting the balance, you need to send it the balance that you want it to set, that you want it to be. And then you're not going to get anything back. You're just going to set the method and that's it. So you do not want to return the balance. You don't want to return anything at all. We're just going to send it the value we want, set it, and forget it. So here's how you would set the name, email, and phone number once you already have a person object. So you do set them here in the constructor, but say, somebody changes their phone number and you want to be able to update it, there's no way to do that right now. All we have is being able to look at phone numbers. We can't change them. So again, it's going to have to be public because we want anybody in the world to do it. This time, we're not returning an integer or a string or anything. So we say void. That means don't allow return statements to Java. Void means nothing. Shockingly, we're going to call it set name, just like we called the other one get name. And again, the reason to do this is because when you're using other people's Java libraries, it's really nice if they use the convention set variable, get variable to be consistent with everybody else in the world. You don't have to do it that way, but I will like you more as a person if you do. And then you have to send it the new name. So this is how you declare a setter or a mutator. Public, so anyone can use it. Void, you don't get anything back. Set variable name, and then whatever you want to set that variable to. And then you just set it. So interestingly, many IDEs, integrated development environments, you may have heard of Eclipse or Dr. Java or BlueJ or Greenfoot. Some of these, Microsoft Visual Studio, my personal favorite. Sorry, VS Code, not Visual Studio. Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Anyway, a lot of these, when you create a class, will automatically create all the getters and setters for you. Because by convention, when you're programming in Java, you do this for like all your properties. You need a way to get them all and set them all. And you might need to edit them a little bit, and we'll get to that in a second. But it's really nice and so common to do so that a lot of IDEs that you program in will actually just create them all for you. And then you can go in and edit them or delete them if you need to, which is nice if you have like 15 properties, right? You don't have to set name equals new name, get name, return name, blah, 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 blah. But for now, we have to do it manually. So this is how we set it. So in the chat, why don't you write a little setter or mutator for email? So show me that you know how to write a setter for email. So you can just type it in the chat whenever you're ready. We want to set the email address for a person. Cole, are you typing on a phone or something? Did it autocorrect void to good? I like that though. Public good. Setting email is a public good. I think Shift Enter works. Yeah, you can hit Shift Enter if you need a new line without sending the message. Zachariah killing it. Please killing it. Cole confusing it. Ben really confusing it. Oh, Arahan, I liked it better when I could set my own balance in my own email. to making it all proper. String before phone number is supposed to be capitalized in the slide. Yes, there's a typo. You are correct. Zoe. That's weird. It changes in one of the slides. Check it out. If I go back, there, it's capital, lowercase. All right, I want to keep going because these are pretty straightforward stuff. I feel like you guys are going to get this. Okay, what else have we got for? So we've done this. You've written your own. These are the setters that you guys figured out, or at least you did email, but phone number is the same. So this is the general template that you might see for getters and setters, accessors and mutators. So setting is a void, and you have to send it what you want to change. Getters, you have to tell it what type you're getting back, and you don't send it anything. Technically, you could probably even put void between the parentheses, but nobody does that because it's extra keystrokes, and programming is all about being lazy. So these are types of questions you might get on the AP exam. Go ahead, I'll give you 30 seconds to read it and type your answer in the chat. There is a class, and you have to decide why, excuse me, it will not compile. There may be more than one answer. So go ahead and type your answer in the chat. Sure you did, Elise. Now that you see everybody else is doing D, you want to be on the D train. Next, Grant is going to say the same thing. Come on, Grant, peer pressure. Everybody's doing D. Well, you are all correct. The answer is D. So the constructor method does not have to have a header. That is a perfectly valid constructor. I think they might have been trying to trick you, thinking it's a setter, but it's not. It's a constructor, right? It's not public void set temp. It is a constructor, so you don't have a type refer constructor. You just say public liquid because the class is liquid. Reset temp is missing a return type. That's not true. It is public void. Constructor should not have a parameter. Constructors can have parameters. We know that. D, the reset temp should have a parameter, right? Because you're setting the current temp to new temp, but you're not telling Java what new temp is. So reset temp should have int new temp in it. Or at least new temp needs to be somehow defined. Instance variable current temp should be public instead of private. No. Most instance variables should be private. All right, one more question before we move on. The add people method is intended to increase the value of the instance variable and not by the value of the parameter additional people, but it doesn't work as intended. Which of the following changes should be made so the class definition compiles without an error and add people works as intended? So I'll give you about 30 seconds to go through this. Think about whether add people is a getter or a setter, a mutator. What is it supposed to be doing? What should it be sending? What should it be returning? If anything, for anything. So you know that the problem is either on line 10 or line 12, because those are your only options. So there may be multiple ways to fix this, but you only have the options given. So I know your tendency might be to come up with a solution. That is not what it's asking you to do. It's asking you to pick what would fix this. So the danger of coming up with your own solution is that it might not be one of the options. It is better to look at the options and see if any of them fixes it. All right, type your answer in the chat. Man, how am I supposed to teach you guys anything if you know everything? So you're right. It is a mutator. It is essentially a setter. It is changing the value of number of people. Some of them, right, might return the new value number of people, right? That you can imagine use cases where that would make sense. But it doesn't let you do that. There is no option to do that. There is no add a line 13 return number of people. So the only way you can fix it is by changing the method from an integer return value to a void return value. All right, so I haven't posted the daily videos yet, but I think let's take a break and start on, let's just get these out of the way. So I'll give you, I don't know, I'm going to check in at 10 o'clock with you guys. Hopefully we can get 5.4 and 5.5 done by then, and we can move on to 5.6. So let me make some breakout rooms. Eric, I guess I'm not going to put you in a breakout room. You can just keep working on your own. And Abdullah, I'd really like you to stay in the breakout room this time and try to work through it with people, try to understand it. We will go back if you would like to on a Wednesday and start working through stuff, but please don't leave the breakout room. Put you in, I'll have to make a group of 3 for this to work out. I think those are pretty good groups. All right, here we go.
as my dear friend Dr. Clarkson always says, how do we treat each other more humanely? How do we keep the eye or our eyes on race without forgetting all the other margin identity markers? We don't want to engage in